Glenn, are you going to introduce Sawyer?
So I asked Sawyer if he could reach out to his parents and see if they would talk about the Aberdeen Mills history. And he says, "Well, I know a lot about it, so if you don't mind, I'd like to do it," which is great. So he's going to tell us the story and of the history of the mill that a lot of people probably have no idea about, and some people probably don't even know where it is. Go ahead, Sawyer.
All right, thank you, Glenn, for the introduction and the invitation. Does this show up all right for everybody? Should be a couple cute lambs, Aberdeen Mills. So today I'll be talking about Aberdeen Mills. It is a grist mill, dates back to 1774 in Conewago Township. It is right on the border of Conewago and Mountjoy Township, along the Conewago Creek, right on the border of Lancaster and Dauphin counties. It was in operation almost continuously from its founding, 1774, through the 1960s. It's evolved, taken on many forms. I'll talk about, of course, the next few minutes. But that's where I grew up. We moved there in 2007. I was fortunate enough to get to grow up playing in the creek, fishing in the creek out where Bill used to apparently, hang out in the woods, exploring old buildings. So it was a lot of fun. This is just a photo of it taken from Mill Road. It's from a couple years ago. We've since we took over the mill, we've experimented with a couple different things. On the right-hand corner, you can see we tried doing hydroponic strawberry growing around 2009, 2010. Didn't work out that well, but it was a fun experiment.
Hey, Sawyer, you're fading in and out a little bit. I don't know if it's the distance to your microphone or.
Oh, no. I'm going to see if I can.
That's good. That's great. If you can stay there.
All right. How about this?
So far, so good.
So far, so good?
Yep.
All right.
What was growing on the right?
All right, now we'll all mute again.
All right. Now on the left, we got an old feed bag. One of our neighbors actually knitted this for us, sewed it for us based off of some old remnants that we found in the mill. For here, we've got an overhead view from, I believe, based on how the mill looks, probably late 50s, early 60s, when it was still functioning, later days. You can see all of the main buildings on the property. The property actually extends out solid 20, 30 acres to the right on this photo into the forest surrounding the creek, basically until you hit farmland. But on the bottom right, we have the mill itself. There's a pointer function. So right here, we have the mill. Over here, we have our barn that wasn't initially a part of the plan for the mill property, but I think was developed probably early 1900s. Right now, we have goats, sheep, alpacas, and chickens in there. Up here, we have a storage building, bank barn, mostly used for storage purposes. I think the top floors were used at some point in the mid-1900s for chickens, actually. We've got large, almost remnants of lights for raising like peeps. Over here, we have the house, dates to 1770. This is the house I grew up in. And over here, we have a guest house, originally built as a distillery. And up here, we have an old chicken shack. And that's kind of the basics of the mill property itself. Said the mill was founded in the 1770s. The mill itself was built 2 years before the founding of our country, 1774. The story goes back a little bit further. It was founded by Mennonite immigrants from Rotterdam, Barbara and Ulrich Scherer. There are a couple different spellings. This is the closest. This felt the most German-ish, so I went with this one. But turns out until like telephones, telephone books, the spelling of last names were all like phonetic. Everybody spelled it a different way. They arrived in the port of Philadelphia from Rotterdam in 1752 and ended up receiving a pretty large chunk of land comprising like basically the entirety of Conewago Township, or a significant portion of what is now Conewago Township, as a land grant from the Penns, 1762. It's kind of had dual purposes. The first one is, basic land development, building the mill. The second one was like kind of a political purpose behind it. It was built as a kind of like peaceful settlement, specifically for promoting positive relations with indigenous folks. Turns out the woods behind our mill were really popular, I guess, roaming grounds for Native folks. The mill was built in 1774. They built the house first in 1770. The mill continued in operation as a share mill till the late 1700s, early 1800s. I believe 1808 is when Barbara, his wife, passed, and she operated it almost until her death. She moved away a few years beforehand. I believe there was a gap in operation in the early 1800s. Their son was Heinrich. He didn't end up sticking with Aberdeen Mill. He moved down to Marietta and started up a mill there. He left for Lebanon, not Lebanon, Pennsylvania, or Lebanon County, but Lebanon, Ohio in 1820. Apparently the mill in Marietta didn't go too well. He, by the sounds of it, from a couple documents that I read, was fleeing debts in Pennsylvania. He went out, started an inn in Lebanon, Ohio that ended up becoming a bit of a landmark in the town. At this point, the mill was mostly grist mill. Grain, wheat, barley, corn. Over the various forms it takes, they end up doing a lot of different things with the mill beyond just grist milling, but early days, it was just our grains. Might be asking, how does a mill work? There are a couple different parts to it. Slides are kind of out of order. I'll go second first. So it's a mill. It's powered by the Conewago Creek itself. If you look at this, this is a map. Out on the bottom left-hand corner, you have the mill itself. You see a blue line. That is a raceway. It was built to feed from the creek into the mill. So you can still see remnants of this raceway. If you walk out into the woods, you'll see brick, stone, and concrete. If you go midway through this blue line, you can see a lock actually kind of built into, it looks like built into the woods right now, but a physical lock that you can raise up and down. The gearwork's still there. The wood actual blocking mechanism is deteriorated, but you can still see it. You look at this green mark, this I think might be where Bill was talking about fishing. This is the second dam that was used for much the modern incarnation of the mill. If you look at the really tiny red lines on the map, you can see in real time, if you go out hiking, remnants of clay and stone from the 1770s dam that they used to fuel the mill. So we can see that. So they feed the water in using this blue line. If say we have a flood or something like that, a really big rainstorm, and the raceways overflow, we have a diversionary pathway through this yellow line. Instead of feeding the mill, fuels the water right back into the creek. But what do they do with this water? There are a couple of things. This mill is powered by an overshoot water wheel. There are a couple different variations of mills and ways to build these water wheels. This was kind of the fancy way of doing it in the 1770s. Have the water powering buckets that turn the wheel clockwise in with the flow of the water. It's called an overshoot water wheel because instead of the water causing the wheel to turn counterclockwise and the buckets go under, the water instead shoots over the wheel, thus overshoot. This powers a series of axes and basically large metal axes that connect to, on the left-hand corner of this image, runner mill wheels. The milling itself has nothing to do with these water wheels or raceways. It is very literally two large stones. The one on the bottom is called our bedstone, doesn't do much of anything. We've got our stone on the top, the lead stone, that is actually powered indirectly by this water wheel. If you look at this image, the corn is actually dropped in the center of the stone and is pushed outwards by the dress pattern. of the stone. So it moves outwards into like increasingly small divots that just break down the corn through that rotation of the top stone over the bottom, moves it outwards, and as it comes out, you'll have either flour or grits or whatever ground grain that you are trying to make. That's the basics of how the mill actually functions. We'll see various incarnations of this general idea: stones driving against one another, moving grain outwards in a manner breaking it down. So Barber passes away in the early 1800s. We see a period where the mill is, as far as we can tell, not operating. In the early mid 1800s, we found census documents from 1870s. We know that they lived at the mill then, contemporaneous documents dating the birth of their children to the 1840s at the mill. So I think they've moved in at least by 1845. This time, Scherer's Mill has undergone a name change. It is now Redseker's Mill. The George and Abraham Redseker, two upstart brothers, decide to buy and move into the mill in the mid 1800s. They operate the mill for a solid 50 years until approximately 1900. Their grandchildren end up marrying out of the family. They go on to do their own things. Their granddaughter, Jane Brinzer, actually married Fred Klein, who of Klein Chocolate Factory, which I understand is the predecessor to the M&M Mars factory in town. Their grandson, Redseker Brinzer, which I find just to be a ridiculous name. I don't know who named grandchildren with their grandparents' last name, not first name, but he's founded the Harrisburg News Agency in early 1900s, which apparently was a popular newspaper in Harrisburg proper. At this point, the mill diversifies its functions pretty seriously. It's no longer just grain. They do hemp, they do wood, it functions as a sawmill, and we build a distillery, which functions a couple purposes. First off, everybody loves booze. It's safe to drink. The secondary function is as kind of an early form of viral advertisements. You get bottles of liquor branded with Redseker's Mill, travel throughout the region, spread word of the mill. They use this to attract loggers for the sawmill functions, and I believe they had a type of flat cake that was really popular, Redseker flat cakes. But we see the mill continue to function. At this point, we have photos from the period of the mill. So this is taken from Mill Road on the Lancaster County side. It's a fun thing to note. Originally, the mill was a part of Lancaster County. That was Derry Township, Lancaster County. At some point, late 17, early 1800s, county lines are redrawn, becomes a part of Conewago Township in Dauphin County. This is a photo of the barn, back end, and a structure that's no longer there right along Mill Road with the mill off screen. Over here, we see a photo of the main house, the distillery in the back, turn of the century, and that aforementioned census form, George and Abraham Redseker. That's kind of the mid-period of the mill. Come 1900, we have a pretty serious fire in the mill that effectively destroys the third floor of the mill. They have to reset, bunch the stone. As a result of this, the third floor is like pretty new relative to the rest of the mill. If you go into the basement, you see like original stonework dating to the 1700s, and then much more modern, woodwork the further up you go. This is around the time of the Industrial Revolution as well. And if you think of this mill, it really is just if you think of a coffee grinder, it is a coffee grinder spread out over the course of an entire building. As the construction, as these machines advance further and further, see this machine in the right-hand photo is an American Midget Marvel. It is a very large machine, but it is referred to as the Midget Marvel because it, in fact, is the entirety of the mill condensed into a room functionally. So this time we see a lot of different milling equipment start to pop up in the mill. They use hammer mills, which instead of using stones rotating across one another, a series of hammers that rotate and break down the grain. This is an example of that, the American Midget Marvel, which actually processes grain from the very beginning, includes winnowing and cleaning the grain, and then actually milling it. That's still in the second floor of the mill. It's a photo, kind of what it looks like around then from a neighbor. I think it's a cute photo, so I decided to include it. There was a covered bridge around then, which is no longer there. You might notice that from an old photo. The bridge is no longer functioning right now, unfortunately. Come 1912, it takes on the form of Aberdeen Mills. Was assumed by two brothers, Herbert and Ezra Miller, 1912 from the Gantz family. Descendants, the Gantzes, still live, or no, it was assumed by the Millers in 1938 from the Gantzes, who assumed it from the Redseckers in 1912. The Gantzes still live in Conewago Township. They come by and visit the mill pretty frequently. Talk about swimming in the raceways when it was functioning. The Millers moved in 1938 and were the final operators of the mill as such. They operated the mill from 1938 to 1968. Ezra, the younger of the two brothers, passed away in the mill, was killed by the water wheel actually in early 1940s. If you see that large building on the right hand with Aberdeen Mills written on it, that's actually a very new addition to the mill that was built in 1952. Continues to function as a grain mill predominantly during this time. Doesn't really function as a sawmill or hemp mill or anything else beyond grist at that point. Herb visited the farm quite a few times since we moved there. He lived at the mill until 2002. Sold the business to White Oak Mill, which is still operating, late 60s, went on to work there. I believe they passed on customers to White Oak. He passed in the early 2010s. See a lot of photos from that time. A lot of pieces of paraphernalia that we found in the mill, antique shops just in the area, pens, pins. This was actually I think an ambulance, potentially, a Civil War Red Cross vehicle that was converted into an Aberdeen Mills vehicle, which I think is pretty cool. Right now, the distillery, around this time, some point early 1900s, the distillery ceased to function as a distillery, probably Prohibition, that would make sense, and is converted into a just residential house. And we moved here 2007, Herb left 2002, floated between auctioneers for a couple of years. My folks moved in 2007. This is kind of what it looks like now. Got a Walt Whitman quote and a bunch of animals. So Neale family purchased the mill at an auction in 2007. The mill is no longer functioning. The water wheel is still there, but it is corroded and rusted away to the point that it's just the metal exterior of the wheel that is still in there. We have acquired a lot of antiques over the past couple of years from the memorabilia and paraphernalia from the mill when it was functioning. Tried to collect as many types of miniature mills, be they coffee mills or hammer mills, and made the interior of the mill into a small informal museum on milling history. My parents really interested in, passionate about sustainable agriculture. So they've experimented with the hydroponic strawberries, for example, free-range chickens, free-range pigs, goats, sheep, and they partnered with Conewago Creek Initiative. The Conewago Creek is eroding at a pretty serious rate. There's pretty serious pollution, partially due to runoffs. We've been working with neighboring farms on wastewater management. My favorite thing that we do as part of the Conewago Creek Initiative is our Earth Day celebration. Done this annually starting 2010 or 11, I believe. Didn't do it this year for obvious reasons, but we plant trees along the creek to try and prevent erosion. We have local zoo come down, have animals display to kids. I think we did falcons in 2019. And right now, in large part, it functions as kind of a hobby farm. We have a lot of sheep, goats, alpacas, chickens, many barn cats. The alpacas and sheep, sometimes we shear them. Mother's really into knitting. If any of you are interested in fresh wool for spinning, we might be able to hook you up. And that's the mill now. Thank you. We've got a lot of photos of animals. We're on Facebook under Aberdeen Mills. We have a website at aberdeenmills.com. Do any of you have any questions about the mill?
What was the source of the name Aberdeen?
Aberdeen, that, so far as I can tell, is lost to history. I think it's the Ganses family that oversaw the Aberdeen name change. It was family name until early 1900s, potentially branding, I don't know. But the Aberdeen name the Aberdeen Mills does predate Aberdeen Road, so wasn't named after the roadway.
What happened to the covered bridge?
Covered bridge, same thing that happened to the current bridge, in all likelihood.
Flood.
Yeah. The creek floods pretty regularly. Yeah.
Marion,
Do you happen to know the name of Ezra's son?
Ezra's son.
Yes.
Oh,
I remember when Ezra was killed, and he had a son that was in my class, and I can't remember his first name.
I've met him on a couple times. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll text my mom right now. See if I can.
Just so you guys know, the bridge there that is out, that will be replaced. It's slated for 2021.
Oh, great.
Exciting.
Is it going to be one lane or two? One.
You can't, it's 90 degree turn onto there.
Yeah.
So it's going to remain one. So it also keeps the traffic flow slower there.
The name is Leslie.
What's that?
The name is Leslie.
That's it. Leslie Miller. Yes, that's
Leslie.
exactly right.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Went to high school with him.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
any last questions for Sawyer?
Sawyer, with the renaissance of distilleries, is there any talk of bringing the distillery back?
If you stop by, you can try some of our experiments. Keep that on the down low.
Oh, okay.
What kind of liquor are you making? Is it bourbon or vodka or what?
Bourbon. If you use some charcoal, get that smoky flavor.
Bourbon's my favorite.
Field trip to Aberdeen Mills.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
When our kids were younger, we would go out to the rail trail and we'd park our bikes and walk down to the creek, to the stream, and then we'd swim.
Yeah.
The kids would, climb over the rocks and swing on the rope that was there, and it was great. I even had one of the kids' birthday parties there, invited her classmates over, and they were thrilled with that.
Oh, that's great. It's a good creek for swimming.
Well, this sounds like a potential bike trip. Get our Rotary biking crew together and do the rail trail and stop in there for a refreshing beverage, perhaps.
Get that old people's bike group.
There you go. Any last question? Anybody?
Thanks a lot, Sawyer.
Almost.
Thank you.
So, Sawyer, we really appreciate your enthusiasm, fascinating local history, and thanks for the conservation piece. As you know, that's Rotary's 7th area of focus now, global conservation and so on. Everybody, the last meeting of 2020 is next week. So it should be a great time together, another great time together. So please encourage anybody in our club that you haven't seen for a while to join us. We'll see you then. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.